Welcome everyone to Hero of Health, the platform where we bring you the community, coaching, and education that you need to empower yourself to beat chronic diseases, such as diabetes, heart disease, which includes hypertension and high cholesterol, as well as some form of lifestyle cancers as well, such as breast, bowel, and prostate. If you haven't met before, I'm Dr. Linda. I'm an emergency medicine doctor, and I'm here with my lovely co-host, Dr. Wendy, who is a GP, and we are both lifestyle medicine physicians. And if you're joining us on YouTube, please support our work by clicking the subscribe button just below. And if you're here on Zoom with us, well, we're going to have an amazing conversation after this interview on the non-recorded session. Today, we are going to speak to Sarah Clarke, an incredible lady, such an inspiration, who is now has had 20 years experience of working in public health promotion setting, specializing in emotional well-being, community development, and workplace health. Sarah currently volunteers as a cancer buddy, supporting people diagnosed with cancer and their careers. Sarah has her own transformational life coaching business, supporting people with a range of topics to help them get there where they want to be in the future. You can find Sarah on Sarah Clarke at tlc.co.uk. And why would I love you to find her and get the support is because she has an incredible life experience that we will be talking about today. She will share the love, hope, and purpose that helped her to get through terminal cancer. Welcome, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us and giving your time to the community.
Just need to
Thank you. Sorry, it wouldn't let me unmute. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Sarah. I'm really excited to be here with you all today.
Hi, Wendy. Thank you so much also for joining today. I'm looking forward to this incredible interview with you. So let's kick it off. Wendy.
Absolutely. I'm so looking forward to this conversation with you, Sarah, just about the positivity and hope that you can bring to all our wonderful listeners. As we were speaking before, you know, none of us knows sort of what's around the corner and when our life might be threatened or when it might even come to an end. So I just would like to just say that obviously I'm very mindful that there are many people who will be listening to this conversation that will resonate so strongly with them. They may be on their own cancer journey, they may have just been given a cancer diagnosis, or it might be a loved one that you're supporting through the journey of cancer. So, you know, I just want you to all hopefully benefit in some way by hearing Sarah's amazing story, whether that is in a way of instilling hope and positivity, whether it's to learn about how to optimize your health in any way in which you can, to feel as though you have an element of control in this journey, or in sort of picking up some tips in how to support anyone that you know is close to you on their cancer journey. So Sarah, thank you so much for giving us your time, and I'd love for you to start at the beginning of your journey and share with all our listeners.
Okay, so back in July 2017, I was fit and healthy. As you know, was mentioned, I was working in public health. I was one of those really annoying people saying, come on, let's do some stair challenges, workplace health stuff. You know, was quite sort of confident in my health. I'd previously run a half marathon about 3 months before my diagnosis. Thought I had quite a bad chest. It just wasn't going away. Had a biopsy. Cancer never, ever even crossed my mind. It didn't even cross my mind at all. However, on the 4th of July 2017, I was diagnosed with stage 3B non-small cell lung cancer, which, you know, absolutely, utterly, like it was a smack in the face. I had absolutely no idea. And on that day, I was given sort of prognosis of 12 to 18 months. And the actual words that were said by my consultant where it's not days or weeks, it's months and possibly years. So I had a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old at the time. So obviously it took a long time to kind of get my head sort of around that. So over the summer, I had about 3 rounds of immunotherapy, which did actually work. So I managed to do 1 run. And then in September, it all sort of fell to pieces, really. And by October, my breathing was absolutely terrible. And in the November, I just thought it was lung cancer. It's, you know, I just thought that was what my breathing was. But I ended up having to have 2 emergency pericardial infusions, which is when the fluid builds around the sac around your heart. So I had them sort of 2 weeks apart, and then keyhole heart surgery to sort of fix that. So basically it's a natural progression to lung cancer. So it was just a bit rubbish, really. 2 weeks after having that surgery, I went on to chemotherapy, which was cisplatin, which is really evil if anyone knows about that one, and something beginning with P, which I've forgotten. I managed 3 rounds, and I was supposed to have 4, and it wasn't an option to have the 4th round. It was something I just couldn't do, because it was just, I said if I had the energy, I would have gone down to the bottom of the road and threw myself under the 88 bus, but I didn't actually even have the energy to get out of bed. So that was it for me, really. And then in February of 2018, I had lots and lots of radiotherapy, and that was it for the lungs. And they always said that there was nothing else, there was no other treatment. That was it. So it was, you know, in terms of having a cancer diagnosis, it was kind of as worse as it could get. So I had a good 6 months. I think I managed to go on a cruise with the family and everything, which was really good. But in October, November 2018, I had lots of awful symptoms around, I thought it was anxiety. I kept like losing the car, not knowing where I was going, massive pounding head. Everyone said it was just anxiety, panic, oh, fine. I had a scan, and I had like a walnut-sized tumour on my brain here. So I had emergency surgery the next day. And I remember looking it up online saying, how long do you live after brain surgery? After a brain tumour. And it said 6 weeks. And I just completely just like, no, didn't even register that was happening. And surprise, surprise, 6 weeks later, I had my second brain tumour. And it was my wonderful, wonderful neurosurgeon, Mr. Sinner, who in their DMT meeting, he was the only member of that meeting who said we should operate again. Everyone said, like, you know, statistically, and I completely agree with them, you know, all this money for another operation for approximately like 4 or 5 more weeks of life. But he was adamant that I had that extra time with my children. So I am eternally grateful to Mr. Sinner. Yeah, and he was the one who, so after that I had a stereotactic radiosurgery, when you have a big thing on your head. Had my CT scan after having my big thing put on my head, and they found a massive cavity filled with fluid. So I had to take the thing off my head, had my 3rd round of surgery, and then 2 weeks later I had another thing put on my head. Actually had the stereotactic radiosurgery, which obviously has helped. And then I think I had a really long conversation with Mr. Sinner, my neurosurgeon, who explained to me in great depth. He asked me, but I asked him what my prognosis was and what it would be like. And he was so honest. And I think that's something that I remember so much, that he was so honest with me. He sat down, gave me that time. He didn't fob me off. He treated me as a person. He sat on the end of the bed, whereas all the other doctors would stand up and I couldn't see them. He would sat down, held my hand and just said, do you want me to tell you? And I said, yes. And he did. And it was wonderful. And I had this release. He just said to me, Sarah, you will not make it to your 39th birthday. And I was 38 and I had about, how long? 6 weeks to my birthday. I was like, right, okay. Thank you. And that was just this massive sense of relief, like, whoa, I could stop doing all this stuff that I was doing, which I'm sure I'll get onto later on in this conversation. And I remember just coming home, and that was it. I was coming home to die, and then I'm just still here. 3.5 years later? So yeah, I think that's
Sarah,
my journey so far.
That's just incredible. So just to recap, so you were 37 at the time when you were given that diagnosis, having been super fit, running the Sheffield Half Marathon, never even contemplating the thought of cancer. Never smoked, was living a healthy life as a 37-year-old wife, mum of 2 children, and suddenly you got landed with that cancer card. That must have been horrendous, and you know, and the impact this must have had on the ripple effect through your family and your parents and everyone supporting you. And through that journey, you entered, so you had chemotherapy first of all, and you mentioned the fact that cisplatin was horrendous. And can you, what kind of side effects did you get from the cisplatin?
For me, the fact that you have your own cisplatin room in Western Park Cancer Hospital in Sheffield, so you normally have like your big wards, you have your own cisplatin room because the side effects are so severe. And I suppose it's to stop putting other people off who are having their treatment. And it was just sickness, just unbelievable sickness. And it affected like my smell and my taste. So, and obviously it got worse each time you had it. And it was just horrendous. The sickness was my main thing. Nothing worked. So I got used to, I had to say to people, do not give me those tablets. They make me more sick. I need intravenous anti-sickness stuff. So like I couldn't eat. I was losing like half a stone, 3/4 of a stone each round. So I stopped weighing myself when I got below 7 stone. And it gave me a completely different sort of outlook on weight loss. Yeah, it was just,
horrendous
horrible.
Sickness. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how often did you have to have that?
I think that was every 3, it was 3 weeks.
Every 3 weeks.
I had it, I think beginning of December, then I had it New Year, and then I had it in January. Okay. And I remember saying to my husband that if I have it again, I can't come home. I can't be in that home environment because it's not fair.
Yeah.
And I get affected by sickness all my life in terms of like travel sickness. It's my sort of go-to when I feel ill. That's what happens. So I think I was more prone to it than others. But it was horrible.
Yeah, bless you. There's nothing worse, is it? That horrible feeling of sickness all of the time. You can't get away from it. Yeah. So did you choose to not have any more of the chemotherapy?
I chose not to have my 4th round. And I've still got the email which I sent to my wonderful oncologist, saying that this is not a choice. I'm not choosing not to have this. It's something I cannot do. I cannot do this. It was really interesting because it changes your perception on, oh, for goodness sake, this is going to save your life. You need to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And I felt very, I was so angry that I never got a chance to say, right, I've got cancer, I'm going to overcome this. Right from the very beginning, it's terminal. We've got we've got 2 lines of treatment, immunotherapy, which didn't work, and then chemotherapy, and that was it. So I thought, well, what's the bloody point? And excuse me if I swear throughout this, because swearing has been a very good way for me to get through this journey. What is the point of having another 3 weeks feeling so utterly shit? I don't want my kids to see me like this. I don't want my family to see me like this. It was awful. As I said, if I could get out of bed, I just kept imagining the 88 bus at the bottom of Ely Road and just walking in front of it. That's all I could think of doing. So, and my oncologist was absolutely wonderful because he completely understood that it's something that and no one knows how they're going to feel.
Absolutely.
It's not happened to them. Yeah.
And everybody is an individual, aren't they, in terms of how they react to these medications. So surgery was not an option for you. There was no option to surgically remove that tumour.
So the tumour, I think it was, scan pictures found it hard to look at. Yeah. So I had a tumour in my left lung, top lobe, up here. Yeah. And it spread all to my lymph node. So that's how I was diagnosed, got a biopsy from one of my lymph nodes. And because it was in the lymph node, it spread. They said they couldn't do it. But I am jumping ahead here. The original doctor who diagnosed me at the very beginning, Dr. Jennifer Hill, who again is wonderful. She, I saw her, like I said to her, it's 5 years practically to the day. And I was seeing her because I was suffering from really bad chest infections because of the massive scar tissue in here in my lung. And there's no signs of active cancer. It's just scar tissue. We had a bronchoscopy go down and I was like, I want to be awake. I want to see. And the nurse was like, oh, I can't see any cancer in there. And I was like, yeah. So although I'm having terrible chest infections and I'm having lots of issues with my lungs, I just said to her in passing, but can we not just lob it off? And she just said, well, actually, there's other things we'd like to do first, but that might be an option. And it was sort of like, whoa, because it was always like, no, we can't do that.
Yeah.
So that made me think, oh, well, maybe there are other options. And I hopefully that, we can come up with other ways to improve my sort of chest and the chest infections. But no, that wasn't an option.
No. So that's just recently you've had that consultation with Dr. Hill
over the summer.
Over the summer, yeah, and it was definitely not an option to even consider. Never. 5 years prior, and even following the chemotherapy and things. But now there is that potential that the scar tissue that part of the lung could be removed, because there's no sign of active cancer.
She didn't say no, so it was like, well, yeah.
Oh, wonderful!
So
again,
great.
Yeah, picking up on those positives. And just going back to obviously you had the chemotherapy, it was horrendous, and presumably sort of within that 3-week period between each dose, you weren't really able to function as normal. Like you said, you couldn't play with your kids and all of those things. And then you had the brain tumours, which I'm presuming were they linked? Were they metastases from the lung?
They were.
Yeah,
I do remember them saying, well, maybe it's just like a non-malignant tumour that's just by chance got there. And I remember saying to the doctors, can you tell me whether it is for cancer or not? Yeah, it is. And I was like,
yeah,
and that's a natural progression from lung cancer to so I was driving with this. I remember I had the scan at the Northern General Hospital at like 7:15 in the morning. So I'd left my kids with the neighbours across the road. And my husband had come with me. I dropped him off at work, and then I'd driven to have a Pilates lesson. A yoga lesson with my mum. And I was doing this yoga, and I was like closing my eyes like this, thinking, I can't actually focus on the instructor. And I was able to do the movements, but it was just, I had to say I had to tell my body what to do. And I turned my phone off, and the doctor had about 7 missed calls from the doctor, who had obviously been contacted by the hospital saying I needed to come in that afternoon for surgery. And I was driving home, and I realised I couldn't use my left hand. It's very similar to signs of having a stroke. And I was thinking, I'm not far away. And I realised I come to a little roundabout. I couldn't change gear unless I looked at my left hand. So if I looked down, I could change into first gear and look back up. But obviously really dangerous. So I drove all the way home in like first or second gear. And then I lost my ability to speak because I heard this voicemail, and I rung up the doctors and I couldn't talk. Again, very similar to a stroke, and I couldn't talk, couldn't speak. And the wonderful Dr. Humphreys was like, Sarah, I'm so sorry you've got a brain tumour. And I remember just running across the road to my neighbour's house because the car was there. And I remember consciously thinking, I'm not even looking, I'm just going, and just opened the door and had to say it. And it was just, and then they bought an ambulance for me to have surgery that day.
Goodness me. And so just on the screen here, thanks Linda, is the image of your head. So this is your scan. And the really bright white area, which is actually the right side of the brain. But on the screen, as you look at it, it's on the left-hand side there. So we've got normal brain tissue on the right, if you look at the screen on the right-hand side. But then on that left-hand side, you've got that bright white mass with then the black around it is fluid and swelling, and the pressure that puts on the brain and the area in which that bright white tumor is like you say, sort of affecting your ability to sort of subconsciously move your limbs, and then also your ability to speak, and that feeling like you can't focus properly, all of that impact on the brain. So this was there growing in your head, and it got to the point in that yoga lesson where you started to become really symptomatic, which seems like that kind of suddenly came on, didn't it, during that session? And then sort of the progression with you being behind the wheel, bless you, to get to your neighbours. And what was Adam, your husband, around at the time, and the kids, or?
Yeah, so I mean, my family have just been unreal. It's just, you couldn't even imagine a better family. And I know, yeah, I'm very, very lucky in all aspects, really. So my poor husband, that poor man, having to, you know, a 4-year-old, it's our daughter's 5th birthday, like 5 days after diagnosis, and not being able to tell anyone, and being like, oh, big party, and so he's been absolutely wonderful. And luckily he works as a civil servant, so they've got really good sort of carers leave and sort of support. So he was at work actually in Sheffield, which was great. And I remember the doctor saying to my neighbour across the road, the wonderful Jane Newman, could you ring Adam and let him know? And Jane was just like, no. Can you please ring him? Because she just couldn't, she was just absolutely beside herself, really. And so Adam sort of had this phone call from the doctor saying, you know, your wife's have got a brain tumour, and they all knew that I obviously had lung cancer and I wasn't very well, and they've just been absolutely fantastic. And I actually think it's been harder for him. What he's had to go through is probably worse than what I've had to go through, because he's had to support 2 kids, and my eldest Joe, who is now 12, he's autistic and he has processing difficulties. So for him as well, so we already had, you know, he was given a statement, or an EHCP as it is now, from the age of 3. So we've had to sort of support him and his needs as well. So Adam having to deal with that, and then Georgina as well, our youngest, absolutely fantastic. And then my mum and dad live down the road. I'm actually in my childhood bedroom at the moment, because it's quieter here than it is in my house. And like, I've got a twin sister, and since, you know, when I was diagnosed, she's like, right, you know, she sold a flat within a year. She'd moved up to Sheffield, bought a house in a really expensive area because of good schools, where she doesn't have any kids, but she wanted to be nearby. And I've got just the most amazing sort of family network. And it's without this experience, I don't know whether we would have really evaluated this as much. So yeah, all just
amazing.
Fantastic.
Bless you, Sarah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I can only imagine the emotion that it's bringing up. So well done. And also for anyone that's watching and could benefit from the interview that we're going to have with Adam in a few weeks, to get the story from the carer of somebody with cancer. It's really powerful, isn't it? It's a very different perspective, and actually how often the carer themselves can be in the shadows, but they are also suffering and struggling themselves, aren't they?
Completely. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that'd be a fantastic thing to watch.
Yeah.
When we were talking about it, it came up naturally that they are the silent heroes, right? It just gives me goosebumps, the story that you're sharing, Sarah. It's you're so much emotion running through me to think from both perspectives how Adam was there for you, and how rarely do we actually address the silent heroes behind those who suffer. And applaud them for the incredible work that they do. We really look forward to getting that aspect out there as well, because there are so many of you out there who are caring for loved ones who are suffering. And yes, their suffering is real, like this story, but your suffering is just as real as theirs, because you feel love and you are them through that care, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
So going back to having the brain tumour, Sarah, and having all of that treatment that you were going through, what happened next? Because I think when you and I went for that lovely walk through Ecclesall Woods, you shared that you actually sort of got worse and ended up going into a hospice.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. I've got my little timeline here. So in between, so when I had my second brain tumour, so I had 4 lots of surgery in total. So it was first brain tumour, second brain tumour. Oh no, first, yeah. And then the third one was when I had a cavity in my head. And what they did is they put, I think it's called an omega-3 reservoir, but don't quote me on that. They put a bit of plastic in there to sort of expand, to stop it from, to swap the fluid from collecting. I don't really understand.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a stent. I couldn't feel it. It was really bizarre. But what they said was, if that fluid ever built up again, they would be able to, it's like a pinprick, it's a tiny needle, it wasn't a stent. They'll be able to drain it off. So one morning, I actually woke up and I realised that I couldn't move at all. I mentioned about the sickness thing. I could not move. I was laid on my front. Kids couldn't come in. I couldn't do anything. All I said to Adam was, because I've been discharged and I was under St Luke's, so the doctors and nurses were coming around, and the community nurses, they're amazing. Great guy called David who'd come round, and so Adam's. I couldn't talk, and Adam, what do you need? And he said, do you need St Luke's? And I was like, yes. But I had a massive bag of all these injections and medicine, pain relief at home in a locked rucksack, so the nurses could come round and give me masses of steroids if I was really ill. So Adam managed to get the kids. They wouldn't go to the neighbours. So Adam just turned up at school, and there's a kids club, and they knew what was going on. They weren't booked into kids club. And we just said to Ian, who ran it, who again was absolutely wonderful, I need to get Sarah in an ambulance. Can you just have the kids? And he was just like, whenever you need to, it doesn't matter, just bring them in. And then wonderful David from St Luke's came round, gave me loads and loads of injections, steroids, which were just amazing. Within 5 minutes, I was up chatting to them. Yay, I'm fine. But they got me a room at the hospice, because it was basically, I was at the end of care kind of thing. And it was like, oh, like fucking hell, this is the last time I'm going to be at home. I'm going to see my kids again. It was really, really, really horrible. So they got me an ambulance, had my own little private room, and I was in there for possibly 4 minutes when I said, my head feels squidgy. I think it might be liquid. Can you just drain it? And they were like, oh, feels squidgy. Well, maybe. Why don't we ring up the neurology department, see if they can just drain it off, just to make it more comfortable for you in your end of life care, in your own little room, the nice garden view and all of this. So the ambulance people were fab. They were like, oh, we'll just stay with you. We'll just take you. They said you're one of the nicest patients. It's great. You're better than other people we have to deal with. It was just, we had a really nice sort of, like, I remember we were all like laughing and all of this. And so they took me to the hospital, and I've forgotten the neurosurgeon's name. So I was sort of in like a back entrance somewhere, and all he did, I was like in a bay, and so I'll just drain it. I'll be like 5 minutes. Can you stay? So the ambulance people, oh no, we'll stay. We'll take you back to the hospice. So it was lovely. And so he tried to drain it, and he said, there's nothing to drain. But what was there was like about that much of thick goo, and it was an infection. They're like, it's infected. So they made me stay in neurology while they got it sent over to a different hospital to be assessed. And then they realised it's all been infected. I needed to have my 4th round of surgery to take this omega-3 plastic thing out of my head. And that was when I went home on Mothering Sunday on the 29th of March.
So you went home,
Mm-hmm.
not back to the hospice to die?
There were no beds for me, and they didn't want me to be on a ward because I've got kids, and it's distressing for other people as well. I think it is, if you've got kids, they try and have you in a separate ward. So I could have stayed in hospital, and I think I was so mad, completely and utterly mad, masses of steroids. My brain was completely mush, so I was just, everything was highly sensitized. I was angry at everything. I was like a completely different person. And I think Adam just said, I don't want you at home, which we can laugh about now, but it was like, he just, he'd got 2 kids. He was still kind of, I don't think, he wasn't working, but he just couldn't deal with it. He needed a break. He couldn't do it. And it was like, okay. And I remember like being in hospital after like a week going, am I allowed to come home? And he was like, yes. And it was because, and the reason why I was so mad is because I had an infection. I couldn't bend down. I had to have a grabber, and my thing was getting mad with people not picking up like the bath mat in the bathroom, because my head would just about explode because it had a massive infection. So Adam said I could come home. And then I think about 2 weeks later, St. Luke's rung me up saying, oh, we've got a bed for you. And I said to Adam, I'm all right just to stay here. And he was like, all right then. And then I've never, I'm still technically.
And you're still home.
Yeah.
So what happened? So you'd been in St. Luke's, you'd identified to die, that you were at the end of life. You identified the infection, thankfully, by feeling that squidgy bit, which was giving you all those horrendous symptoms. Went back to hospital, had that treated, but were discharged home still in the end of life care process. So what happened? Like what kept you that what happened after that?
I think what was really interesting, and we spoke about this a bit prior to this interview, it was when Mr. Sinner sat down with me and said, this is what's happening. So I'm not quite sure what way around I should do this, because I did lots and lots of complementary therapies because I had no other treatment options. And I really want to stress that I wasn't saying I'm not doing this and I'm not doing other stuff. I did every single NHS medical options that were available to me, but there just weren't any. So I was like, I'm going to die anyway, I might as well try X, Y, and Z.
Absolutely. I think that's really important for us to stress, isn't it, that all of the treatments that are available, you grab them, don't you? It's evidence-based. You know, these are the medicines that we know, can help and support, and you will do that. But like you reached a point where you firstly couldn't tolerate the cisplatin. It made you feel so unwell, and you actually come to the point where you would rather take the consequences of not having it than having it. But also there's an element of trying to find out what possibly you could do for yourself that might help you and sort of be in control of. I think it's a really good place to kind of share that, if you don't mind.
No, that's fine. So and I also, so when I ever went back into hospital for various things, I sort of often stop the complementary stuff, because sometimes you never know whether that's going to affect with the medication that you're on and things like that. So, but there's so much stuff you can do in terms of lifestyle medicine and lifestyle choices, which generally anyone can do, which have such an impact. So again, as I said, I was, I've been vegetarian most of my life. I was drinking at the time, but not heavily, I never smoked. There was quite a lot of things that I was already doing. But some of the things that helped massively, which is what I would really like to sort of get across in this session, is talking to people about it. Preferably not your family and friends, talking to someone else, because when you talk to other people, your family and friends, they have that burden on them, and then it's so hard for them. And sometimes I'd feel at a loss, like I wanted to scream, because I didn't want to talk to them about it, because I couldn't bear the pain that I was going to put on them. So I think the first thing that I did was a friend of my sister's husband was going through a similar cancer journey. So I met up with him, and he went through all the different things that he'd done, and some of the books and the authors that he'd read, and things that were useful. And there was a cancer treat club, which I joined as well. And it was really interesting. It was specifically for people with terminal cancer, although we didn't call it terminal cancer, like life-limiting cancer, because then we could just talk and get it all off our chests without feeling like we were upsetting anyone. We're all in that same boat. And it was really specific that it wasn't for people with primary cancer, because they had an opportunity to get over it. They could go, yay, and then they'll be like, whoa, look at me, I'm cancer free. And for when you've got a terminal diagnosis, you're like, yeah, well, look at you. And loads, but people die. It's a group that you're never gonna leave. And there was something really comforting that you could be completely and utterly yourself in that group. So I'd really sort of suggest finding people to talk to, and that's why I volunteer as a cancer buddy So for people who've been newly diagnosed or
So Sarah,
carers.
sorry, how did you find that group?
When in Sheffield, there's St Luke's, there's a place called, it was called Clifford House, but I think now it's called Ecclesall Road South. But it's like it's a charity, part of St Luke's. So there's a hospice in a separate building, and then this is somewhere that carers and people with cancer can go, and they do sort of complementary therapies, they do arts and crafts.
Okay.
I did yoga and Pilates there, and I met someone there called,
go on, sorry, Karen.
I met someone there called Claire, who set up this group. It's absolutely fantastic group. Unfortunately, we haven't got funding anymore, because the way that funding works, you only get it for like a year or 3 years, and then you can't reapply to the same thing. So what we do now is sort of we meet up. We used to go and have money to do like pamper things and out for meals and day trips, whereas now we don't, but we meet up in a cafe in town, and we have a strong WhatsApp group where we share sort of knowledge and information.
So was this given to you by St Luke's or the cancer or the hospital, sort of these resources?
It was just by chance that I became friends with Claire at St Luke's. So there were at the hospitals there are leaflets, there were leaflets for the Cancer Treat Club, but I just haven't seen them, and it's a shame that that's folded now. But there might be sort of more online groups, which I don't know why I didn't really get into that at the time, but I think that would be something I would maybe suggest that would be useful. So talking is something that I think is really important. I'm complete blood phobic. I used to faint in my biology lessons at school. So I had hypnotherapy, which again was my talking therapy as well. It was absolutely amazing, and it made me feel like I was doing something worthwhile. I was having control over my own health rather than just letting things happen to me. So I was able to have my blood taken without passing out. I was able to have chemotherapy, my immunotherapy. The thought of having like a cannula in literally just is like my utter worst nightmare. Whereas now, I had a follow-up scan last week. Pop it in, off you go, it's fine. So it meant,
and is that because of the tools that the hypnotherapist gave you to cope with that? Amazing.
It was, and I delivered. So I found out about the hypnotherapy guy from chatting to my sister's friend's husband. So he's specialised in supporting people with cancer, and he saw me through my worst, most darkest days, from diagnosis right through till till not before the brain tumours, when I was well in that period there. So he had to do a lot of background into where my fear came from, and you were able to find your happy place. So every night I'd listen to the CDs. There were CDs, it was hilarious. So I was like, I've got a CD player. So every night I'd lie in bed, and I felt like I'd go to bed, I was doing something proactive. I was being proactive, and hypnotherapy is not going to interfere with anything. It was about my mind and having control. And a lot of this is what I've learned from sort of health promotion and my job. It's about giving people more control over their health rather than expecting the medical profession to do things for you. It's like, right, what can I do to improve this situation? And it worked like that. And so it went through all the heart surgeries, all of that sort of stuff, all my chemotherapy. I'd turn up like yellow, like green, half the size I am now, just literally in an absolute state. And he did this really good model where he said, so there's a bell curve. So if you draw like a bell, this is your diagnosis, and the average is in the top here, which says 12 to 18 months. But what about this end here, which is 5 years? You could be there. They tell you it's the here, but you could be there. So I always write him a little email at Christmas, and when it was exactly 5 years to the day that I saw him, I emailed him saying, made it to 5 years. And I think if it wasn't for that positive attitude and that hope and that positivity, I think can impact so massively on how well your body reacts to treatment. And I'll talk about that later on. I think that's, like, for me, I don't know what's stopped the cancer from growing, and for what's made my scans have show that there's no signs of active cancer, but there's something in there about that positivity and that control and having hope. That hope, that diagram, yeah, I could be up there. I could be up there. I could be at that end of 5 years.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold on to that. And every night going to bed, listening to the hypnotherapy, doing my walk through the woods, finding my happy place. So when the pericardial infusions, you had to be awake for them. There were procedures rather than operations. And I remember just lying there doing my hypnotherapy. Well, you could see it all on the screen, you know, right next to you there. And just being in my David Hockney picture, jumping into the swimming pool. And I was just doing my breathing. And it was just, I was in control of that situation. And when it hurt, and when he had a registrar doing it the first time round and who got it all a bit wrong. And when it was hurting, I was just sort of like, ow, this hurts. Rather than screaming and crying, it was like, I was in control. I was able to say, hang on a minute, no, this isn't right. And when 2 weeks later it happened again, the consultant was like, don't worry, I'll do it for you this time. I promised you it would never happen again. And I was like, yeah, you did. You promised me.
That's amazing. It just reminds me of the talk you were talking about hope. And we had an incredible talk with Dr. Neil Bindeman, who is here with us today. Thank you for joining. Do chip in anytime when you like, Dr. Bindeman. You have done an incredible service to us all, where you actually proved how hope makes such a huge difference in our mental health. Not only that empowers us to actually be able to take on life again, even after such a devastating diagnosis. And I'm in awe after seeing your research and showing how it actually works. And what happens, sadly, when us doctors, when we are in front of you and the first time we deliver this news, how devastating it can be when we remove that hope. And where does it lead us in our mental health? Would you like to share on that, Dr. Bindeman? Yes.
Oh, I can. Thank you, but let me unmute myself. Sorry, I tried it a bit earlier on, I couldn't. Yeah, Sarah, listening to you is just amazing. I got so much going through my head just listening to what you were explaining as well, because there is a fighting spirit inside you that clearly is just fabulous. And when you're given the news that like the news you've been given, you need to be given that message of hope, because you've got a long, hard journey ahead. And we were talking about this just literally last week at something. The biggest impact for you and for anybody, I've got to say, when it comes to a diagnosis, the biggest change is that split second in which 1 second you are Sarah Clarke and you have no label, and within a second you're Sarah Clarke and you're diagnosed with a condition. That chaos that just suddenly channels right through you, that's why you need the hope at that point, because you're suddenly going into that tunnel of the unknown. And that's what everybody, quite rightly, gets scared with, because that is terrifying when you have that. And if only more people could at that point just give a bit of assistance as to, and actually say to you things like, well, we'll be there with you, we'll hold your hand through that journey every step of the way, even if it is a terminal diagnosis. But I'll throw into that point, life's terminal. So the point of giving somebody those words, in my view, is totally and utterly pointless. It does nothing other than to harm and damage your internal spirit and the hope that you have within you. So we've got to stop using that word, use a different phrase. And what we showed, what Linda was alluding to, was when you remove hope from somebody, And the research that we did showed 600 or so people got involved in this research. 400 of them had traumas and some didn't. When you remove hope and they are telling you that they are feeling hopeless, as well as not selecting the emotion hope, or we did this research, you leave the person with totally destructive emotions. And I'll say again what I said in the interview, you are actually going to end up killing somebody if you're not careful, because you are causing them the harm of triggering those emotions within them. I'm not saying that obviously you're killing them by doing, by the way that, I don't want it to come across in a really bad way in that sense, but you're putting messages into somebody that is taking away any sense that they've got fighting spirit there. It's conclusive, and it so happens we're actually, I'll put it in the chat if you want, but we're doing a survey at the moment because another friend of mine, Chris Lewis, who you may have heard of Chris, I don't know, but Chris had a diagnosis of terminal cancer quite a long time ago, and he's with us. And he's asked me if I would do an article to do with palliative care, the words palliative care. So we're doing a survey at the moment to ask people to give us their emotions associated with the words palliative care versus the words quality of life care. We want to contrast the two, and happy to share that. I think, Sarah, you'll have a few things to say, I'm sure.
Yeah, and quality of life is my thing. Yeah.
And Dr. Binneman is not just coming from a scientific point of view, but he has also gone through a similar diagnosis, and that's where the passion has come from. So it's a personal and science.
Well, I have a brain tumor, Sarah, as well. So, yeah. So it was when.
It'd be nice to get your contact details. And I was just saying, it'd be very nice to get your contact details. It'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
And Neil, do you think we could share after also the little graph that you had about hope? I think it's just such an incredible graph where the emotions come up on the list.
Oh, do you mean the actual data?
Yes.
Yeah. No, let me. You carry on,
yes.
and I'll look for it, and I'll message you and tell you once I've found it and I can put it up.
Super. Thank you.
I think what it really demonstrates is, like you said, Neil, the feeling of hopelessness, generates those destructive emotions, whereas contrast that with feelings of hope, they become more positive and proactive emotions that, Sarah, you're really describing so well through the hypnotherapy and those things that suddenly you felt in the driving seat of your own journey.
Yeah.
So going back to those key things that you felt like you did that may have contributed to where you are today.
Yeah. So for me, I did a lot of stuff. So there was reading books around real life stories was really important. So this is in hindsight, I have to say. Lots of people, I've got a cancer library, I've got a cancer cupboard, and you open it and it's got all the cancer books from all around, the world. Fantastic. My dad's a social scientist. He's an academic, so he was like on it, finding out all the papers, doing all the research. So many people around me doing all of that, which was great. And I was trying to read these academic books. I'm ridiculously dyslexic. Really, managed to get a degree and a master's, but really struggled with that kind of work. So for me, it was like, oh my goodness. But then later on, it was only at the end of my journey, really, I found books like there's a book called The Cancer Whisperer by Sophie Savage, and it's about her journey with cancer. It's a really good book which you told me about, Wendy, called Radical Remission by Kay Turner, which are like positive stories. It's like, wow, I want to surround myself with stories where it's positive stuff. And yes, you might not everyone will get there. And the thing about hope as well, it's not about saying that you will all be able to be cancer free. It's about giving you hope that you can take control over your own death as well as your own life. So, there was a time at the end where I was so at peace with who I was, the life I had, the life I'd led. I talk a lot about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which you can Google. And the top is about achieving self-actualization, which is like pure perfection, happiness. And like no one reaches it. But I was able to reflect back on my past life, my current life, and look back at all the things that I'd done and how the jobs that, as I said, I'm really dyslexic, really struggled with school, but the jobs that I'd chosen, the degree that I'd done, which degrees that I'd left and then gone back again and, you know, gone back to uni another time to find something that fits in with my core values, which is around, you know, hope, empowerment, fairness, kindness and joy. Those are like my core values. So I created this world that I was so proud to be in. So I was like, wow. And people don't have a chance to reflect and look back on that, which is why I've gone into like the life coaching, because I feel like I've been there and sort of done that really. And I was able to look back, and so I wrote letters to all of my family, and I looked back and really reflected on our relationships and how wonderful, you know, the good things, the bad things, and I apologized for things that I'd done in the past. And, you know, and with my sisters, I've got an older sister called Ruth and I've got a twin sister called Alison, and, you know, I really did write, and so much thought and compassion went into these letters, and actually writing it all down, it was like, wow, like I am so lucky to have these people in my life. And it wasn't letters to be given out to them once I died. I decided I would give them out. This was when I had like, you know, I had 6 weeks and it was getting down to like 2 weeks and gone, you know. And I wrote birthday cards. I spent £75 in paper chase on birthday cards for my 2 kids, and I wrote birthday cards up until the age of 21. And I don't know if anyone's heard of something called Record Me Now, which is the most amazing app I've ever come across. And I think it's 40 questions, and the questions are being developed globally. So it's been done very scientifically, and it's questions that you can ask, which really get a full picture of someone's life. So, I mean, it was ages ago when I did it and I was completely mad, but it's questions around like your favorite music, your first memories, the schools that you went to, what you'd like to say to your kids when they were married, and all about falling in love. What are your views on politics, religion? It's like 40 odd videos, and I sat down completely mad, face swollen up like this on steroids, and did these 40 videos for the kids. So later on in life, it was all things around like sex education and first relationships, and you know when you get your period and all this sort of stuff that I was able to do. And I really sort of thought about how I would like to do that, which meant I was able to reach this sort of self-actualization and think, God, I've had an amazing life. So at this point, I was more than happy to die. I had a celebrant. I'd planned my funeral. My kid, Georgina won't go, but Joseph, my eldest, who had a Mario kind of passion, went to Hope Forest burial ground to see where Mum was going to be buried, and he had got his Mario moustache on and his Mario outfit, and we took pictures, and I had such I was ready, you know. And my husband was like the best dad in the world. His parents and his family live sort of locally in Yorkshire. They were being absolutely amazing. As you know, my family was just 2 miles down the road, less than 2 miles down the road. My sister was half a mile down the road. Just like, wow, I got the best situation here. I'm fucking annoyed that I can't be here to enjoy it and to be there. But, you know, like my life insurance paid out. I've got all my pensions. I've got all the benefits that you're allowed to when you've got less than 6 months to live. We were sorted. And I felt I could stop having to do 17 million smoothies a day, trying to get 25 portions of fruit and veg in, being vegan. I was doing all this stuff, and I was in a constant state of fight or flight, which did nothing for my body. So when I decided to follow this American program, 7 steps and all of this, and I was juicing, smoothies, everything, and everything is organic. You know, I'm still vegetarian, but I love my cheese. I'm sorry, I'm still vegetarian. I don't drink, you know, a very plant-based diet, but it completely just took over my life. I had no time to have any proper social interaction. It was just mad. And when I could stop, when Mr. Sinner just said, that's it, your time's up. I came home from hospital, picked up a saucepan of macaroni cheese and started eating it out of the pan. And that is the most amazing meal I've ever had in my life. And endless bits of white toast with butter. And it was almost like that was when I had this realization that I could just stop and breathe. And that's the word. It wasn't giving up, it was stopping. And that's when I said I did all my, the weight was visibly lifted off my shoulders. And that's when I did all of my cards and my videos and all of that sort of stuff. And I think it gave me a purpose. And that's another thing that we've spoken about a lot. So it's about having hope, and it's having a purpose in life. And if you don't have a purpose, then you're lost and you give up and you've not got those positive thoughts. And it's having that purpose, right? I want to get everything right for those kids. What are the really important things in my life? What are my values? How do I want my kids to remember me? Made me really, really evaluate who I was and what I wanted to be. And I kept saying, oh, if I had my chance again, these are the jobs that I'd like to do. This is what I'd like to do. And it gave me purpose. And I think that was a turning point in my healing, because from that time of leaving hospital, after one person said, yes, let her have the operation, and having 2 extra surgeries after that, my scans gone, absolutely fine. And I know there is another scan picture of my now. That I've always got a dodgy scan picture of my brain because of my infection. There's like a lightning scar, which means I'm always going to I have seizures. I can be a bit wobbly. But in terms of cancer, it's not there.
Sarah, the mention of purpose is, I just always want to share take the opportunity to share that paper that came out with regards to purpose, which showed that no matter what kind of diseases patients had, those patients who had similar diseases but had purpose on top of it were the ones who lived the longest. And without purpose, really, what are we waking up for every single day? No matter cancer or no cancer, the truth is, as Dr. Binderman mentioned, is that, life is terminal. After all, there's 100% death rate in this room, in this whole world, right? So
very true.
This 100% death rate is all of us. And that's where we have to remember to bring the purpose, bring the mission, and never take no from the world if we have something to say or do. I love that energy that you brought. And I see Dr. Binderman, he was just nodding along, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
I got tears in my eyes, but they're tears of joy. Honestly, Sarah, it's just wonderful. The word release is fabulous, because suddenly you felt you could just let go. You'd been holding on to whatever it was. And I think, or you probably know this, that's what turned your life around. That's because you just let go. There was so much other stuff potentially that was tied up in everything that you let go of. And it comes, for me, it comes back to the importance of letting go and expressing all emotions. Every single one of your emotions is important. It's there for a reason. The swearing is fabulous. There's a recent paper on it, I think, somewhere, showing you the benefits of swearing and how it can actually help. It's just because you are expressing everything. You are allowing yourself to do stuff. In my childhood, if I'd sworn, I'd have got a clout around the year. And that was because I wasn't allowed to do anything like that. But I'm referring to that because the fact that maybe there was something in the background that was stopping you from allowing yourself to express those things, but now you feel you can because you reached that point in your life and you thought, what the fuck? Basically, I've got nothing else to bother about,
And
so I might as well just...
situations warrant
Yes.
swearing. They're that bloody awful. You know, you don't just swear for any old reason, but it's like, actually, it's fucking awful.
Yeah, of course.
Yes,
and if you were
yes, and yes. Thank you for that, because unfortunately I'm potty mouth here, and I knew that there was a purpose for these words. I knew why I'm always feeling happy is because the words are just coming out as the feelings arise. Unfortunately, when the children are around, I do have to manage that when these kids are around. But it's wonderful to hear that, yes, we can express emotions and it's okay to swear sometimes.
Do you want me to share that slide, Linda?
Yes, please do.
Yeah,
the power of emotion and the healing of it, because you just mentioned that you know, when you were young and in this cultural setting, you weren't allowed to express anything really, let alone cursing words. So
anything. You need to give me permission.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Perfect.
And then I'll show you. There we go. Thank you. Right, I'm just going to show. I'll move the slides so you can see. Hold on. Let me just put that particular slide onto full view, so you can see that slide. Can you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Brilliant. So the first one of this is just to show you how all participants in this survey, when you selected hopeful or hopeful was not selected, when hopeful was selected, you have a mix of emotions. The green are obviously the more positive ones, the reds are the more negative. But as I say, you know, we call them positive and negative, but they're all there for a reason. When hopeful is not selected, just look at what you have got there in front of you. All those emotions. Now, I've never thought of this until right now. If many of those emotions are negative, and you are trying to stop yourself from expressing those openly, there is neuroscience now that tells you, and I have done some of this in my own PhD, but there is neuroscience that tells you if you don't express the emotions that you're meant to, that's when those emotions become harmful to body and mind. And so if you're going to do that to somebody, and you're going to give them those sense of emotions, plus then if they feel guilty about sharing those emotions and they feel they've got to suppress them, especially in front of certain people, you're going to make it doubly difficult for them as well. If you then look at it from a point of view of after trauma, when hopeful is not selected, if you've had trauma, it's worse in terms of everything. I'm not sure, I can't remember the other slide. No trauma. And what's interesting there is where anxious change. So when hopeful is selected in the no trauma, anxious is much further down. When hopeful is not selected, you're putting anxious straight up to the top. And then you've got frustrated, etc. You've got other ones as well. So yeah, basically, and there's other, and this just so you know is part of a presentation that was given, and it is a part of an abstract as well, looking at becoming trauma informed. And we're doing something which I'd like you to do for us, and we can do this after, connect afterwards. But we've just started something called the 100-word story. And we launched it last week, and that's with PCNS and the Lifestyle Health Foundation. Mm-hmm. And we launched it with a guy called Johnny Atchison, who is an emergency medicine consultant. I don't know whether you will have heard of him, Linda. He's an emergency medicine consultant in Leicester. He lives with Parkinson's, diagnosed with Parkinson's, and he did his 100-word story. He did it, and then he did it on video, shared it, and we showed it last week at Best Practice. And he inspired me to do mine, so I did mine as well, and I'd love you to do yours.
Oh, I'd love to.
It's a challenge, mm-hmm. trying to get your words down to 100 words. It was for me, as you can tell, because I talk. But yeah, so
no, that sounds great. Thank you.
Okay.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that powerful slide and to bring that into your research perspective, what Sarah is sharing with us today, the power of hope, the power of love and purpose that you found through your journey. Sarah, I would love to know what would be, in kind of summary, the few things, maybe 2, 3, or 4 things that you think from a mental health point of view, anybody who is struggling not only with cancer, but difficulties in their lives, what could they tap into from your personal experience?
I've actually done a top takeaways from, because I sort of had to think about this yesterday, and it was really good at sort of gathering all my thoughts. And the top thing for me, it's about having hope. I think that's just trying to find hope in your life and purpose. They're sort of linked together. And being able to reflect on your life, think about the good things, what you'd like to change, what things would make you get hope in your life, what things would give you more purpose. And I suppose this links in a lot with the life coaching that I do, and talking to people. Sort of really, so talking to people in similar situations, reflecting, having purpose and having hope. I think those 4 things are really key to me, sort of at this stage of my journey.
Wendy, is there anything else that you would like to ask?
I was just going to say, going back to that feeling of relief and release, sort of the 2 words really, where when you were describing it, you could visibly see that calming of your nervous system, and like Neil said, I think that was, so powerful. Just it felt to me like you were just breathing it out. It was incredible. And for you, to share that actually honesty, openness, and knowing that, that was kind of a turning point for you, where you then became really purposeful in your actions afterwards, didn't you? And with all the videos that you did, and the birthday cards that you wrote for your children, and then suddenly it appeared that these cancer cells were just disappearing, through all the other things that you said as well. And just for me, I vividly remember when we were walking through the woods, Sarah, that you'd said that if somebody had told me prior to my cancer diagnosis, if somebody had told me that I was living the life I am now, I would be asking them, how do I get there?
Yeah.
And that to me just made me feel like, that there's kind of a feeling of, bizarrely, I'm going to use that word, gratitude and thankfulness for sending you on this journey, for you to come out of it at this end, doing the things that you love and feeling really purposeful.
Exactly. And that's brought tears to my eyes, really, because it's completely true. It's a very bizarre feeling. And this is what life coaching is where you say, where are you now? Where would you like to be? And you can slowly pick away, but it would take years and years and years, and all that courage. And the fact that where I am now, like my relationship with my family, with my husband, we've been through so much. And, don't get me wrong, the ups and downs, and how, we've had some horrific times and it's been awful, but we've all had to really reevaluate our lives. And like my kids now, I mean, my goodness, they are just the most amazing kids. And we've always been incredibly honest and open with them. They've had loads of play therapy. Right from the beginning, we've told them what's been going on. And the relationship I have with my family, I could not have imagined it being this good. And I think it's because of what's gone on. And because they know what's happened. They've thought they were going to lose the mum. And it's just a bizarre but wonderful place to be at the moment.
Oh, Sarah, can I ask you about that, actually, the power of honesty within the family setting and also with the people around us that are more in extent? Could you elaborate a little bit more on that honesty? What did that bring into your family?
Yeah, so some people are completely and utterly against sharing the news. And I know in some of the circles that I've been in terms of my support groups, they don't tell the kids that they're ill. The kids have no idea. They don't want that, which is that's personal choice. But for me, the honesty has been, it's meant that I could be myself. And you know, that release that we said about lifting it off your shoulders, I'm not holding this sort of secret almost around, which I think drags you down and saps you of your hope. It's obviously got to be, you've got to judge it right. And I suppose with the kids, they didn't know what cancer was. They were very young. They didn't know of anyone who'd had cancer before. So we mentioned that word. And some people who have cancer live less than people who don't. And that was how we explained it. Yeah, you know, but we don't know. Yes, some people, you know, and that was what it was. But then when it got to that crunch point of a few weeks to live, they needed to know, because they needed to say their goodbyes. And I remember very vividly having to explain it to them. And you know, it was awful. But I think we've had such an honest relationship. And I do remember a friend of mine who, she lost her dad. Her dad died. Sorry, she didn't lose her dad. Her dad died. I think that's really important to get that terminology right, because kids run around going, "Oh, we've lost him. Where have they gone?" You know, her dad died when she was 10, and she said to me, "Do you want me to honestly tell you what would be the best thing to do?" And I was like, "Yes." And she said, "Just be honest with them. Just tell them the truth." And I was like, "Right." And you know, for her that was really important, but not finding it out later. So we tried to do that as much as we could. Yeah, and I think it's had a massive impact on our family in a positive way.
So, Sarah, can I ask you one question? This might be a bit of a difficult one. What would you say the one thing perhaps that you've learned from your children that they might have said to you that you can pass on to other parents with children? What, because hearing it from the child's voice, I've got 2 children, but hearing it from the child's voice is powerful.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we listen to the children and we also help them to communicate and we pass that on.
Yeah. I think for me, it was always really, really small steps with the kids. It was drip feeding them what was happening really, really, really slowly. And that reaction, I remember on the A61 driving through Sheffield saying that some people with cancer die sooner than people without, and like the screaming in the back of the car, and it's like, "Oh, it's all right, kids, we'll be fine," you know. Some people live a lot longer, it's fine. So that was the first little drip about what it was, so they understood that a bit more. And they also had play therapy with a wonderful cancer charity in Sheffield called Cavendish Cancer Care, lots of complementary therapies that we all accessed. And my youngest, Georgina, had play therapy, and that was fantastic for her to express her anger and her emotions. And I had really, really adult conversations with her when she was like 6 or 7. But we bonded so much. And, you know, every night now we spend 20 minutes, half an hour. We got like a little notebook and we do our emotions diary, and we draw pictures and we do silly little emojis, and we laugh our heads off, but so we know how we both felt during the day. And that honesty that we've got, I think that's why when I really thought I was at the end, I felt, do you know what? They're sorted. They're the best kids in the world, because they had that resilience, I think. But they had the people around them to support them. I'm babbling a bit. I'm not sure if I'm properly answering your question.
Can I ask you? No, it's all right. Because do they protect you? Do they give you a sense of they feel they have to protect you in any way?
That doesn't come up. No.
And did they ever ask you any questions that you found interesting or unusual?
Not that spring to mind. I mean, they don't really understand, because we're not really a religious family. We've got a lot of faith, like I have faith within myself and within human nature. But in terms of having an afterlife and all of this, it was very much, we don't know what happens when people die. People have bought stars. I've got a star somewhere in the sky. Someone's bought me. So we did a lot of talk around that, and there's some kids' books around people being. That's what we said, actually. People being in the sky, mummies in the sky. And that's where they thought that I would be, watching over them in the sky. Yeah, I think Yeah, that was a lot. It's been so long since we've spoken about that, but I think that was, yeah, and someone's got a telescope for us to
Dr.
finally.
Bindham, and what was it for you that your children have taught you?
Sorry, I didn't catch the question. Can you say again?
Yeah, just the question back at you. What was it that your children have taught you?
Oh, well, I'll always remember my son came in to see me in hospital. This was before the surgery, and he was only maybe where we'd be. Oh God, I can't remember. 7, 8, can't remember. Anyway, he was in Cubs or Scouts. Maybe he was a bit older because I think he was Scouts. He came in, and I could tell by the time he was getting a bit fidgety. And he said, "Dad, I've got to go now. I've got to go. I've got Cubs. I've got Scout, whatever it was, Scouts." It was nice to sort of to see me, but he had important things to do. He had to get back home, and that was fabulous.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that I had learnt is you've got to live in the moment. And the one thing that we learnt from Anita Rose in what she said as a health professional who's heard difficult news herself, if you're having to give that difficult news to a patient, make sure you as the health professional are also kept in the moment, not to be distracted by other things that might be going on in your life, or you're having a difficult day at work, because then you can't give the attention that is desperately needed when you're giving that difficult news. And being in the moment is something that has really hit home, and children are the best at it. And if you've ever got a difficult time ahead of you, so for example, you've got some chemotherapy that you're going up towards, taking your mind away from that, children will do that. Young children especially will do that. You go and play with them, and they will draw you to that minute, and that's fabulous.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Being in the moment. I think it's one thing that we are really, really bad at in this really speedy life. And that's exactly what's fueling, unfortunately, also all this stress and inflammation. And what I'm taking away from here is hope, love, honesty, and being in the moment through those channels is really what gives us the magic equation. And when you top that off with purpose, then you kind of have it all. I know we talk about terminal cancer, but as I mentioned before, life is terminal. So these important concepts that are very poorly practiced, I think, in current society are things I think we should be talking about no matter what diseases we are suffering from. For me, as an emergency doctor, I see death every single day. Yesterday, we had an arrest. Tonight, I'm going into my shift. There most likely will be another one. It's very, very common to see death in my life. So when we talk about terminal cancer, in my mind, from my experiences, unfortunately, I'm always reflecting that back into every single day. And as Wendy started in the beginning, we never know when that last day comes for us. It doesn't matter how old we are. It doesn't matter what our hopes and expectations, as long as we live every single day within these concepts of hope, love, and honesty to the closest we can do. I think that's when we kind of touched on becoming whole, becoming that person who do not die from regret, with regret on that last day. And I think that's what I'm taking away from this conversation.
Definitely.
There is the saying, isn't there, about trying to live each day as if it was your last. And I think, like you said, Neil, I think children are amazing at just living in the present moment, not getting wound up about the could be, should be's, what ifs. They are there to keep you in the present and make the most of each opportunity.
And we should make sure they don't lose that. That's the problem, is that when we become adults, we were children once. You have to stop and think, well, why have we become like the way we become? And it's because of society, cultures, and everything that was around about us. So, and what Sarah has done and what she's doing through everything that she's learning as well, is just helping her to refocus on that importance of living in the moment again. And when you've been through a trauma and you realize that your life brings on a different meaning, you then refocus your mind around the importance of the being in the moment bit.
That's beautifully summed up. What an incredible talk. It fills me with so much hope and love for the future, and being able to share this moment with all of you fills me with loads of gratitude. Thank you for joining us today. I think this is a good moment to bring it to a close. I hope it inspired all of you to live a little bit with more of the child within you. Enjoy every single day. Enjoy the sunshine, the rain. Be silly. Stand on your hand if you can. Roll down the hill of grass. Like, just scream if you want to, and sometimes curse too, because we have research that it actually supports our emotions and support each other through this difficult thing called life. So thanks very much for joining us on YouTube. If you like this conversation, please subscribe, hit the subscribe button and share it with other loved ones so that we can inject a bit more hope and love into their lives. For those who have joined us here on Zoom, we will have a little bit of a chat in a non-recorded session. Thank you for everyone. Thank you, Dr. Bindeman, for joining us today. It's wonderful to have you with us. Thank you, Wendy, for the incredible interview. And Sarah, please keep bringing hope into your lives. And now that you are actually, I even forgot what a joy we have. You are joining us as a Hero of Health coach, where we offer free of health coaching to everyone once a month. So if you would like to join us, then go on our website, heroofhealth.com, where you can be coached by Sarah on the second Tuesday of every single month at 1 o'clock. So we hope to see you there. Bye, guys.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.